What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the MG Lifestyle Solutions video. And today I'm going to be expanding on a previous video about how to prevent getting injured in the gym by learning 3 of these concepts, getting them down, mastered, and applying them regularly, whether it be in the gym or in your day-to-day lives. So let's get into these. So let's just review the 3 concepts, movement patterns, whatever you want to call them, to help prevent injury when being active. So those 3 concepts are proper core recruitment, activation. Number 2 is proper scapular positioning, retraction, and downward depression. And number 3 is the hip hinge. These 3 concepts, movements, whatever you want to call them, are probably the most important and most universal across a wide variety of exercises, movements, whatever. Okay, so let's get into some of the details so that you can be more confident and a little bit better when it comes to these 3 concepts, even though hopefully you are familiar with them in one way or another. All right, so let's go. So when it comes to core activation and bracing, there are some general concepts to understand and an overall position that is ideal in most cases. So we want to make sure that we don't have too much of an arch, okay? So we don't want to be overly extended through that low back. So we want to tuck the pelvis, okay? So a little bit of a posterior tilt. We don't want to over flatten either, okay? So being comfortable and knowing how to find what we like to call a neutral spine position, where there's a little bit of this curvature, okay, but not excessively sticking those butts out, okay? So that's one concept. Other concept is the rib position, okay? So we don't want to have these ribs be popping out, okay? We got to kind of lock it down, brace in this position, okay? And from there, ultimately, we have to be able to breathe. So even when we get a nice, strong, and solid activation, we can't hold our breath. So I'm talking, I'm singing, I'm laughing, whatever it is, that's allowing me to know that, hey, I'm not holding my breath, and yes, I got a nice, solid kind of activation. Even though, okay, it doesn't have to be a 6-pack, it can be a little soft on the outside, but as long as you're getting all those layers, so 4 layers of activation is what we're looking for, okay? Ultimately, you want to be able to do it in standing, sitting, laying down, whatever, okay? Because that's going to transfer over into the most variety of movements, of exercises, positions, tasks, whatever it may be, okay? If you need help with that, get some coaching, get some hands-on treatment, okay? Next, number 2. So the second concept is that shoulder blade control and stability. It's going to carry over into many movements. Yes, there's some that it doesn't, but for the most part, it's a safe position to be in. For beginner movements, whether you're doing curls, triceps, pushing, pulling, again, for the most part, it's a good position to be in. So we want to be back and down with those shoulder blades, okay? So the goal of this is to prevent too much upper trap activation when we're doing things with our arms, and that's a common kind of compensation we see in the clinic that can lead to, you know, pain and potentially even injury of the shoulder region without being too specific. So again, kind of a back and down, not to overly exaggerate that, but that's the general concept. Now, can you maintain that position while loading biceps, the triceps, whatever it may be? Because sometimes you get there, but then you can't control it. So you may have to adjust your weight to allow you to sustain that good shoulder blade position. Now, there's a lot more that can be said about this. This video is not going to go into the details of that, but that general concept is something to understand and get really proficient in it. If you need help, again, see someone in person that can coach you along. All right, and the third concept to really master, one of my favorites, is the hip hinge, and that is down at the pelvis, okay? So can we hinge appropriately with our hips and take some stress off our knees, off our back, off other areas of the body when moving through a variety of movements or getting in a certain position for, let's say, back, you know, bent over rows or whatever it might be, okay? So just a different way to understand movement and kind of disassociate movements you know, again, kind of separating knee dominant movements from hip dominant movements. That's really the basics of being a good hip hinger. Hip hinge, there is that carryover from number one, which is being in a good braced position. I think that should just be a foundational rule regardless of what you're doing. So step one is that brace. Step two is, can we maintain and sustain a neutral, you know, hip pelvic position as we move through that hip hinge, okay? So, you know, a knee dominant movement, squat, let's say, kind of looks like this, where hip hinge, hips are traveling back and forward. So it is somewhat subtle if you're new to it. However, it is very important to be able to know when you're doing each movement and how to get yourself proficient in finding that position, okay? So one way I teach it is with a dowel, but when you have nothing, you can use your hands. So you get one hand on the top part of your chest, one hand on your belly, okay? So kind of like that. And then from there, we're looking to make sure that the distance between these two hands doesn't get smaller or doesn't get larger, because that means that you're moving through your spine and not so much your hips. So can we sustain this position, have a soft kind of knee position? Okay, so unlock those knees. And from there, you're gonna just kind of try to tap something with your bum behind you and then bring those hips forward. So unlocking the knees, hips go back, hips go forward. And that's kind of the basis of the hip hinge movement. Ideally, the trunk is staying neutral. The hips are doing the primary movement, especially with that extension. Glutes are helping us to extend. Quads are involved, obviously, as well. But again, typically more a posterior chain. You know, glutes, hammy, those are the tissues that we're primarily loading. Of course, the quads are also working. But again, we can get into a deeper conversation about the specifics of the hip hinge, but overall, starting there, getting good at that, understanding it, and taking it as far as you want is gonna help you prevent getting injured and being more consistent in the gym. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, comment on other videos that you'd like to see in the future, and I'll catch you guys soon.